Ora si registrerà la conferenza.
Okay, so I will start with a brief presentation of the POGRESS project. As you all know, POGRESS is a project approved by the Interreg Europe program. Its main objective is to improve the implementation of regional policies and strategies that are dedicated to the conservation of biodiversity and ecosystem services. So is to start, let's say, a process of policy change in the partner regions that improve the implementation of policy instruments related to structural funds and other regional strategies. This is the, let's say, the main objective of Interreg Europe in general, and this objective should be achieved through policy learning and capacity building activities. We have different policy instruments that are taken by the project. They are mainly ERDF operational programs at regional or national level. So you can see operational program growth and employment of Latvian Republic and the environmental and energy efficiency operational program of the Hungarian. So these are the national programs. Also the large infrastructure operational program from Romania is one of them. And then we have also ERDF operational program like that of Catalonia and other strategies, the regional biodiversity strategy of the Tuscany region, and then the regional planning guidelines of the Greater Dublin area. These are the policy instruments of that are taken by the project. Going quickly to the other slide, the approach that is proposed by the project is based on policy learning and capacity building of activities from partner organizations and stakeholders of the concerned policy subsystems to stimulate collective multidimensional and dynamic exchange of experience that is mainly focused on the ways partners protect and value biodiversity and ecosystem services. And our, let's say, our policy learning is focused on four main topics about the measurement of costs and benefits of ecosystem services derived from land use, and this is today's conference, today's seminar topic. The horizontal integration of the ecosystem concerns into sectoral policy and plans, exploring innovative financial and marketing mechanism for payment for ecosystem services, and the last topic is about the landscape governance for economic and environmental sustainability. The inter-regional cooperation is, which is initiated by the project, is built around two main phases. During the first phase, which is lasting for 3 years, the project will deal with the inter-regional learning process, which includes the design of action plans for each of the policy instruments. And these action plans, of course, as you may know, aim to implement the lessons learned from the regional cooperation into the regional policy. So this regional learning should help the partner organizations to improve their policies. And this can happen through, in different ways, implementation of the projects, change in the management of the policy instrument, or change in the strategic focus of the policy instrument. And then the second phase will be about the monitoring of the implementation of the action plans and developed by the partners in the first phase. Just a short overview of a quick overview of the partners of the project. ANCI Toscana is the lead partner. Then we have two universities in the project, the Riga Technical University, which is coordinating the exchange of experience activities, and the University of Craiova in Romania. Then we have two, let's say, local authorities, or local development agencies, like Eastern and Midland Regional Assembly and the Tolna County Development Agency, and a research center in Barcelona, CREAF, which is about ecological research and forestry application. So you can see the project brings together different local authorities and associations, local development agencies, universities, with a balanced mix between more and less developed regions, which assures also a geographical balance, as you can see in the map here. So this represents the project partnership. Coming to the end of my presentation, just to say that you can follow us on the website of the Interreg Europe. So it's interregeurope.eu/progress. All the good practices that will be presented today will be made available in the project library. You can see here the link, and you can also follow us on in the two social media of the project, Facebook and YouTube. So this is my presentation. I'd like to thank you for your attention, and then pass the word to Sanda for the introduction to the seminar. Thank you.
Hello everyone, dear partners and guests. I'm sorry for being late, and nice to meet you. My name is Sanda, and mostly of you meet me already at the first partner meeting in Florence, and I am from the Riga Technical University, Latvia. Before start our meeting, I would like to say that we are living in a difficult and uncertain time around the world as we face the spread of coronavirus. The physical and mental health and well-being of everyone is top priority, and we aim to operate as normally as possible with the remote work and social distancing. We are following to the news and data on current situation, where the information is truly alarming. I'm deeply saddened by the news of critical situation in Italy and Spain and in other partner regions. Meanwhile, we need to be strong and protect ourselves and our families as possible. I suppose that not everyone knows me and the Riga Technical University team as a project partner, as we all, as I'm thinking, involved a few stakeholders at this online meeting as well. I will remind that Riga Technical University is responsible for the exchange of experience activities and for the analysis of good practices. With the assistance of our external advisor, Zane, we will create 4 handbooks of good practices and 1 final handbook. I am the project manager and the leading researcher. Yanis introduced already, during this meeting, I think Zana will tell us about necessary things, what we should do further with our GP for completing the first handbook. And I invited the stakeholders, the experts from the Ministry of Environmental Protection and Regional Development, Miss Ilona Menziņa, but she is now at the other meeting, and I think she will join us a bit later. Tomorrow at the steering group meeting, Mrs. Vineta Fortiņa will represent our university. As seen in agenda, this second partner meeting is dedicated to the GPs of partner regions. On the end of the GP's presentations, when all partners will be finished with the presentations, we need to choose the best 4 or more practice, which will be included in the first handbook. I think that every partner can choose 1-2 examples from partner country, but not from their own country. It would be honestly, I think. Additionally, I think later in this meeting we need to discuss about the third partner meeting and international training workshop, which is planned on the June already. If honestly, I have some doubts if we can arrange it in Riga, Latvia. I suppose the online meeting is more applicable. We need to decide about the thematical topic of the training workshop, but it's later. And finally, if we will have a time, we can discuss about stakeholders survey draft, or if we don't have a time more, we can do it on Basecamp. So,
Sandra, sorry, just to interrupt you. We can discuss all these issues also tomorrow. We have the internal steering committee of the partners. So let's talk about all these issues also tomorrow, if you agree.
Oh yeah. Okay. Okay.
So let's focus on good practice today.
Okay. Thank you. So I think I can give the word to the first presenter of GP.
Okay, so Fabrizio, please, the floor is yours. I can provide you the role of speaker now. So you can share the screen. And if you'd like also to open your camera, feel free to do that. Fabrizio, can you hear me? Fabrizio, okay, good.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you see my screen and the presentation?
Yeah,
good.
Yeah.
So we can
Put
start.
it in the presentation mode, please. Perfect. Good.
Good. So my presentation is about the outcome of the life project SOS for Life. SOS for Life started in July 2016, was expected to end last year in October, where we got a prolongation of 12 months. I will explain the reason for that later in the second presentation. The coordination is up to the municipality of Forlì, which is in Emilia-Romagna, here in the south east part of the region, which is right north of Tuscany. And the other 2 municipalities involved are San Lazzaro di Savena, next to Bologna, and Carpi in the province of Modena. The other partnership is represented by the National Research Council, Institute of Bioeconomy, and Regione Emilia-Romagna, the National Association of Builders, and Legambiente, an NGO, Legambiente Emilia-Romagna. SOS for Life is a demonstration project which goals is to contribute to reinforce at municipal scale the European orientation about soil protection and urban regeneration, which particular reference to the guidelines on best practice to reduce, mitigate, and compensate soil sealing. To this aim, the project provides tool, rules, and actions which are aimed to promote the community strategy non-net land take by 2050, according to the roadmap to a resource-efficient Europe. The project has a number of objectives, all aim to reduce non-net land take and to anticipate to some extent this directory, with a number of specific objectives: the definition of a methodology for monitoring and evaluating soil sealing and lead take and its impact on the delivery of soil-based ecosystem services. And in order to do that, we need a methodology to detect, evaluate, and map soil ecosystem service. We focus on the urban environment, but methodology can be used to address any kind of soil and land use. And then to define a set of urban regulation and implementation tools to be applied at the municipality scale to ensure the balance of non-net land take in all the new urbanization projects, to define rules and incentives to support urban regeneration, and to provide some example through the implementation of true desealing interventions in the three municipality areas, and this we will discuss in the second presentation, and all of this to be effectively and to a large scale made available to public as largest as possible through rising knowledge and awareness about the role of soil and in the urban environment and the social and economic consequences of soil sealing and land take. The project is articulated in a number of actions, and in this first presentation we will focusing on the action B1, measuring on municipal scale the cost and impacts of ecosystem service regarding land take, and to this aim I will present you shortly the guideline for assessing soil ecosystem service in urban environment and their management. Just a short recall on land use changes in Italy in the last 60 years. You can see from the table that most of the land change was towards urbanization. Since the 90s up to date, a large percentage of the transformation of the landscape were due to the urbanization of the agricultural landscape, which results today with about 80% of a national level of land which has been occupied by artificial infrastructures. In the guidelines, we present a methodology to assess the ecosystem service of soils, focusing on the urban context, and we frame all of this in three different levels, depending on the kind of information available. And we provide some, in the annexes, some tools and examples of how to make such an assessment. And I will focus the rest of the presentation on the methodology. The first things to do is to get some information about soils, their property and their distribution in space in order to assess and then map their ecosystem service. And depending on the goal of the investigation, we highlighted three different approaches depending on resource and data availability. The first, which is more expensive in terms of money and resource, is an ad hoc soil survey, so sampling, analysis, and mapping in order to get to a proper ecosystem service assessment. And the other two are based on existing soil data and maps at different levels, so existing data in vector format relative to benchmark soil profiles and related analytical data, or use existing soil properties and soil function maps in raster format to come to the same assessments. In all cases, soil data are at the base of the assessment and are used to build a set of indicators of ecosystem service provision. This is the reference methodological framework where we have the soil is the natural capital, which is represented by its intrinsic properties. These properties results in some function which regulates a number of processes, which results in the provision of ecosystem services which are benefit for the human population, such as food security, environmental quality, social stability, geological protection, urban quality, and well-being. Of course, there is a number of external controls, either natural or anthropic, that can alter the fluxes of just services. The ecosystem service we consider after decision sharing with the local, regional, and municipality level stakeholders are those in the table. So different kind of ecosystem services, such as biodiversity, buffer and pollutant regulation, climate regulation, carbon stock, agricultural production, water regulation, and water storage. All those indicators are based on soil data, which has to be made available for the evaluation. And in the guidelines, each indicator is described fully, and all the procedure of calculations of the individual indicator are explained step by step, so that potential user can apply them to the data set. Finally, all the indicators are expressed in a scale normalized from 0 to 1, where 0 indicates not the absence of a given service, but the lowest provision in the area, and 1 is the highest provision of the considered services. This is an example at municipality level in the municipality of Carpi, where soil sealing is about 15%, which is twice as much the regional average. In Emilia-Romagna, in Carpi, we had a soil survey. We sampled about 180 points in the urban area, including peri-urban agricultural soils. And we came, after processing the data and the indicator, to mapping the 7 ecosystem services, and to summarize them in terms of hotspots, which means provision of high-quality ecosystem services, or with a lump soil quality index map, in order to provide decision makers a precise and spatially explicit information about the potential of the soil to provide ecosystem services. This is, for example, an application where we have 4 building lots, A, B, C, and D, which are in the southwest part of the municipality, which are about to be built. And in this map, you can see the numbers of hotspots, which means the numbers of high quality ecosystem service, which will be lost once the site will be built. And this is an important aspect of the decision-making process, as it makes explicit what kind of service are we going to lose, where, and to which extent. This is another example for the municipality of Forlì. In this case, we used the local soil maps provided by Regione Emilia-Romagna and the soil database, which is behind the maps. So here we are working on polygons, and for each polygons we calculated the indicator for each different services. And for each polygons, we can also highlight with these radar graphs here the trade-offs and synergies between the different services. We can also, and in the guideline you can find it, the methodology explained fully attached to this kind of evaluation, a monetary value for each services. And for example, we calculated that between 85 and 2016, there was an average loss of ecosystem service for a value of about 172 million euro due to soil sealing, for an additional intake of about 5%. This is the last example of a regional application of the methodology using existing maps for specific soil functions and soil properties. We calculated the indicators for the same services for the whole territory of the plain area of the Emilia-Romagna, And for each municipality, here in the right bottom maps, you can see the soil quality index based on three ecosystem service, agricultural production, water regulation, and buffering capacity. And this kind of maps will be linked to another action within the projects, which is the informative system for evaluating and monitoring land intake and its impact at municipality scale. So to conclude, the guidelines highlights the multifunctional role of soil in the urban environment and the relevance of the service provided. The impact of soil sealing in terms of reduction and loss of ecosystem service provided by soil under different use and management can be assessed and compared in a semi-quantitative way. The realization of new infrastructure and service can be analyzed in terms of loss of services or gains resulting from new urbanization. The approach provided an assessment tools to support land planning in the forms of maps to the aim to reduce or compensate soil sealing, taking explicitly into account local land resources and the function of different soils. And the difficult part of all this exercise was the continuous interaction and cooperation between different expertise, urban planners, soil expert, climate expert, and vegetation experts. And thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much, Fabrizio, for your presentation. Now it's time for Owen to talk about a needs mapping pilot. Just a second, Owen, I'll give you the role of presenter, and so you'll be able to share your screen. Yeah, you can go ahead, please.
That's Nick. I suppose we left the question for later.
Yeah, Enrique. Let's present 5 good practices, and then stop and have a round of questions and answers to the speakers.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. Thank you, Fabrizio. Yeah. Great presentation.
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yeah, and you can see the screen.
That's great. Cool. Okay.
Please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So I'm just having some. Sorry, it's just some windows recovering my presentation there. Okay, so good morning, everybody. Fabrizio, thank you very much for your presentation. It was really interesting, and there'll be certain conceptual overlaps here as well. So what I'm presenting this morning is the National Ecosystem and Ecosystem Services Mapping Pilot for a suite of prioritised services in Ireland. This is a pilot project. It was developed by the National Parks and Wildlife Service here in Ireland. I've attempted to structure the presentation around the template for the good practices, so it's slightly different. So the NES good practice can be considered to be an empowering tool. So basically what it does is it recognizes the value of biodiversity and ecosystem services for human well-being. Human well-being being broadly defined as economic, social, and health and well-being as well. And its purpose is to tackle some of the practical challenges associated with applying the ecosystem services concept in a policy and environmental management way. It provides a tool to decision makers. And what it does is it demonstrates a mapping approach for ecosystem services at the national scale. So it's a national scale pilot, whereas Fabrizio's could be applied at a much more fine-grained micro scale. What it did was it established a framework for a national ecosystem services approach in the context. Sorry. Just 1 second. Okay. And it assists the European approach for the mapping and assessment of ecosystem services. So there's a similar conceptual framework here as Fabrizio outlined. So we have our ecosystems and the key role of biodiversity and how that feeds in as services for human well-being, defined as, you know, the benefits and the values for human society, and they in turn drive the change. In terms of the tangibility of the practice, I suppose the key output of the practice was a national habitat asset register for Ireland. So it represents a single map layer, so it constitutes a single map layer, a national scale habitat map, which brings together a nationally relevant data set. And I think the key part of this practice, when we talk about nationally relevant, we talk about prioritised services, and I'll speak a bit more about how the practice draws on a process of stakeholder engagement. It brings together 46 data sets deemed to be priority data sets, and a full project report is available online with a full methodology. So the project is framed by the Ecosystem Services Cascade and the Common International Classification approach for ecosystem services. So this is the Cascade approach. And again, this will link with what, you know, the approach that Fabrizio would have outlined as well. So we've got our biophysical structure, we've got our functions, we've got our services, and then ultimately the benefits and values that they provide to human society. And there's a whole feedback loop. Obviously, when it comes to common international classifications like this, different regions will have their own requirements. So what this pilot did was it developed a bespoke classification for ecosystem services mapping for Ireland, subcategories. So ultimately, you can't see this properly, but this is the process in creating the habitat asset register, bringing together an awful lot of information to create one useful layer at the national level. So this is an image for the Habitat Asset Register for Ireland, and it categorises key land uses across the country, which are deemed to support ecosystem services. Obviously, some of the data required manipulation. So the pilot generated a number of intermediate layers to inform the habitat register. So I have two examples here on the screen. The pilot is both terrestrial and marine. On the left-hand side, there's a map showing the supporting services, ecosystem services, and it's color-coded depending on whether the land use or that piece of land is part of one ecological network, part of two, part of three. And then on the right is the biodiversity value of the Irish territorial waters. In terms of effectiveness and efficiency, innovation and added value, the project provided a basis for developing and extending the CICES as I outlined. At the core of the project was stakeholder engagement, and this is really important. This enabled the project team to identify which ecosystem services should be prioritised for consideration by the project. And it revealed a large number of cross-cutting issues by bringing together the main different policy areas of interest. And that was really the most interesting part. And it involved an assessment of regional and national policy priorities, which helped to identify the principal areas of economic activity which could be linked to the benefits from the ES. So that really ties in with the aims and objectives of this particular thematic area. There's information on the right about funding and resourcing. The project itself cost 106,000 euro over about 10 months. In terms of its visibility, there were 3 main opportunities for stakeholder input. There were 2 stakeholder workshops, and then there was assessment of the modelling data and rules during mapping, which involved key stakeholders, making the project very visible across the time frame and nationally. After the project, there was obviously the press release. There's a report with all supporting information available on the website. There's also an interactive story map viewer, which is accessible to everybody through that link provided. And I suppose a key thing for us in EMRA is the level of engagement by the National Parks and Wildlife Service with local and regional authorities, particularly in terms of developing green infrastructure strategies. So what evidence of success do we have, and externality, intra-regional coordination and extra-regional impact? Well, I'm just going to give some very brief examples here. So currently in our region, in the Eastern and Midland region, the local impact of the pilot is currently the Dún Laoghaire local authority is using the pilot as a basis for implementing its ecosystem services approach at the local authority level, and it's generating more fine-grained data. At the regional level, we in EMRA, through our participation on the EPJRC en route project, we've used the pilot to demonstrate how ecosystem services can contribute to regional development. And you'll see on the right-hand side there the title of a piece authored by my colleague Travis O'Doherty. At the national level, the pilot has directly informed the National Biodiversity Action Plan, which was conveniently developed by the same organisation that implemented the pilot. So the National Parks and Wildlife Service is responsible for the pilot and is also responsible for the National Biodiversity Action Plan. So there's some real direct impact there. In terms of the extra-regional impact, the pilot has been included on the BIS system, the Biodiversity Information System for Europe, and it has been identified as a GP for the mapping and assessment of ecosystem services approach. Also, having undertaken this pilot, the National Parks and Wildlife Service of Ireland was invited to join the Horizon 2020 Coordinated Action Esmeralda, which some of you may be familiar with, which had really good outputs. Then finally, in terms of the quality of the practice and potential for learning transfer, so really kind of in terms of its transferability and its quality, the methodology was really rigorous. So thematic suitability, the metadata quality, the spatial extent and resolution were examined, and an extensive process of stakeholder consultation took place in order to develop the asset register, and that's a process that could be transferred quite well. The methodology was rigorous, and it was designed to be transparent and transferable. I will highlight one of the challenges, I suppose, or the shortcomings in that, and it kind of relates to the national nature of the practice, in that at the local level, like some of the examples that Fabrizio would have outlined for his practice, this wouldn't be so useful for that, in that any proposed action on an individual site would need to be assessed at the site level using available or creating more detailed information appropriate for supporting decisions at that scale. So that's where maybe this practice and a practice like Fabrizio's practice could come together in some way. However, I just conclude by saying the model, through its methodological rigor, is highly transferable between contexts, of course subject to appropriate input and implementation. And I think I just conclude by saying the value of the pilot has been evidenced by cooperation and exchange at the local, regional and national and international levels. All right, so hopefully I kept to time. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Owen. A very interesting presentation too. Thank you. And I'll pass directly to the next presentation from Enrique about its Excel called the good practice. It's about a free territorial analysis system. Enrica, the floor is yours. 15 minutes max,
No,
please.
please. It will be Carles, as I say, who will present the tool. So please give the. Thank you.
Yeah, Carles, sorry. Please, the floor is yours. Carles, you need to open your microphone and you can share your screen if you'd like, if you have a presentation. Carles, can you hear us? Please open your microphone.
Okay, yeah, perfect. I'm trying to. Okay, the camera.
That's very good.
Yeah, I'm trying to share the screen.
Yeah, you can just click on screen. You have the right to share your screen.
Okay, now yes. Yeah, share. I cannot share. I don't know what's happening.
Are you clicking on screen?
I hope so. Yeah.
Next to the camera, you have the button screen. Okay, perfect.
Yeah. Perfect. It's okay now.
Now we can see.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah?
Perfect.
Yep. Sorry about it. Okay, thank you very much for inviting, and thank you, Fabrizio and Owen, because I think the framework is really quite similar at different scales or approaches, but the experience have been very interesting thing for me. So I will show you our experience in a similar way about GIS applied to land analysis and planning for decision makers. As I told you in my presentation, I work for the government of the province of Barcelona. This is one of the 4 provinces in Catalonia. Is the most populated. You can imagine is a very dense populated region with a very high dynamism from socio-economical point of view. This means a lot of pressure and impacts on natural areas. So we are more for 5.5 million people living in around 4,000 square kilometers along the coastal region of Barcelona, and this means big growth the last 40 years, a lot of land use changes similar to those showed in Italy and probably the same in Ireland, so losing agricultural land and forests because of socio-economical processes for urbanization and land abandonment. And it was because of that the provincial government declared in the 70s last century the first natural parks in Spain, were these 2 ones inland in this pre-coastal range here. This is the 2 first natural parks in Spain, Montseny and Sant Llorenç del Munt. And right now the government is managing a network of 12 protected areas around this metropolitan region of Barcelona. Just for you to know the background of our work, so our administration was pioneer 40 years ago in planification and management of protected areas. So just some nice pictures of this Mediterranean landscape. This is Sant Llorenç with nice cultural heritage, and this is Montseny, so a high mountain up to almost 2,000 meters. And most of those areas managed by our government are part of Natura 2000 in Catalonia, that are covering around 30% of land. So a high percentage of our surface is covered by protected areas because of our network of protected areas included in Natura 2000. So in this context, around 20 years ago, we started to think about going one step forward in land planification and management, because the magnitude and the intensity of the impacts of human activity was so high in our region that protected areas were really necessary, but were not enough. So we needed to go further out of the boundaries of the protected areas, and we decided to try to have a positive impact on the whole land, whole open areas of the region. So that's why we decided to put in practice a GIS project to try to know more about the values of the whole open areas, not just the protected ones. So we started with this GIS land analysis project to support land planning decisions, both regional and local scale, because I have to say that the provincial government has no direct responsibilities or competences, so we cannot approve laws or any regulation. So we have to act as a kind of technical office, let's say, giving our support to municipalities, because we are part of local government. So our first motivation of existing is to give support to municipalities, but we collaborate as well with the regional government of Catalonia, the government who is approving land plans, for instance. So it was a GIS to support land planning decision. So the basis goes to have information. This means maps and assets and databases about ecological and socioeconomical values of all open areas, as I told you, not just the protected areas or habitats of interest, but all the open areas. From the very beginning, we decided to start it in coordination with other public administration, so municipalities and regional government, and with many private partners. I told you a little bit later. And from the very beginning, the last point, I think that was really part of the success, was to disseminate all the information we were acquiring year by year to all the different stakeholders, so public and private stakeholders, so everybody could have access to our GIS information and download it and use it for their purposes in all the cases. So it was public information that was distributed to all the different stakeholders. This is just a map of our external partners, from universities and research centers, NGOs, private companies, public administrations, etc. And just to show you how we work it. So once we had already convinced our politicians to start with that project, around, it was in 2003, more or less, we started to contact the external partners. The first ones were those who already had information about values of open areas, that were university departments and research centers, as well as some naturalistic NGOs working in our region, and we had specific agreements with some economical content to transform the information they already had into information available and useful for our decision makers. I will show you the process. Then we contact with some private companies, some private consultants that were really experts in some fields of work, especially in this case in fragmentation because of infrastructures and connectivity. And we work as well with the most important farmers trade union in Catalonia, who help us very much in defining values of the agricultural and forest areas, and it was really a very nice experience to work with them. And with them, we instead of agreements, we had to close some special public contracts. So we paid for the information, but with a special agreement, so the cost was not very high as just a private contract. And finally, we had a special specific agreement with other public administrations, especially with the regional government, without any economical content, just to share information and to share the knowledge that we were acquiring with this project. Once we had all this map of external stakeholders, we had bilateral meetings with each of them to agree methodologies and to agree all we needed for the project. But at the same time, we established a kind of plenary with all the stakeholders, and we met around twice a year with all of them. It was really a very good experience, because each external partner could show their position about the work of other ones. So the cross of the transversality of the process was really very high from the very beginning, because every partner knew about the work of the other ones, and we share the information, and we build the project all together. So just an example of one of the meetings that we had at that time with all the different partners from different worlds. So it is a GIS, so we can find information about geology, about vegetation, fauna, connectivity, some ecological indicators, socioeconomic activities, etc. And I think one of the differences is that we are not interested only in descriptive information. So this is an example. This is a habitat map, the habitat map used for Natura 2000 declaration, saying what kind of habitat from botanical point of view we had. So this is not really helpful for decision makers if we cannot read these maps. And what we did with the experts was to transform these maps in maps with value for the decision makers. So in this case, we agreed around 12 indicators about habitats quality and habitats potentiality, and altogether we built up this map. This is just a relative scale from 0 to 10 about the value of habitats. And so we did the same for many different layers of information. See, I can show you this map of the value of conservation of habitats for the whole province, but we can show the same for nesting birds. We have same maps for some invertebrate groups, for reptiles, for amphibians, for vertebrates. See, these are maps related to landscape ecology. In this case, maps of connectivity, so different models of landscape ecology indicator. Is just an example of the kind of maps we built up together with trade union of farmers. So what was the value for primary sector? So value of these open areas for agriculture, for forestry, for cutlery, etc. And as I told you some years ago, it was around 2014. No, it was a little bit earlier in 2012 or 13, when the European Union said about that communication on ecosystem services, and then about green infrastructure. We were one of the regions who decided that we got information to try to follow the methodologies to map these ecosystem services, as Owen said before. So we followed the May's methodology, and in fact we participated in some workshops to define methodologies for some kind of habitat. And what we did was to convert that information I showed you before, that cartography, into ecosystem services mapping. So just some examples. We have maps of around 20 different ecosystem services, some examples of ecological functions or support services as leaf biomass, an example of regulating services. This is air filtering for pollution, but we have regulating services related to hydrology, about erosion, about pollination or about carbon sequestration. This is an example of pollination for crops or carbon stocks. And some maps of provisioning related to water, to food. This is the map of food provided from crops, or we have as well maps of production of timber, of fuel for energy, and some maps on cultural services related to the opportunities that open areas are leaving to people for recreation or for other purposes. So with all of these different maps, we can apply it at different scales, as we have been doing for many years. So we started in the 90s with some pilot projects at local level. So what we did was to through some field work to go down from 150,000, that's the scale for the maps I show you for the whole province. So with some field work and some additional information, we were down for maps down to 10,000, 5,000 as this case for one municipality to be applied for purposes of local planning. So in this case, with areas of a lot of importance for connectivity. And after these pilot projects, we incorporate this support for the whole municipalities through what we call our catalog of services. This is the offer from the provincial government for different municipalities, and these are the municipalities that have been involved in different kind of projects, mainly on urban planning at a local scale. So they have used our information, our reports to apply to this urban local planning. And at the same time, we are giving yearly courses for local experts, for local technicians, such as environmentalists and our architects working in the municipalities. And what we started to do 3 or 4 years ago is, after that maps I show you of ecosystem services, we applied that maps at local scale. So this is 5,000 to define what we call the local green infrastructure. As you can see here, these maps are now part or local purposes for urban planning. So these municipalities are making their proposal of regulation of non-urban land following local green infrastructure. This is current ecosystem services at the potentiality these open areas have to deliver ecosystem services in the future. And after this, there are some purposes of managing and restoring some areas with economical support from our provincial government to develop and to make this local green infrastructure stronger in the future. At the regional scale, what we have done is to apply our information to the regional plan for the metropolitan region of Barcelona. This is the analysis map, and this is the final result. That's up to 70% of the province is protected to avoid land use changes, especially into urban areas, based on these natural values and these ecosystem services. So this is compulsory. So the regional plan has to be followed for the whole municipalities belonging to this region, that when they are approving their local plans, they have to follow the regional plan and all the regulations based on open areas. So finally, some ideas about dissemination and transfer of our experience. So as I told you before, so all the information was available from the very beginning in our website. So this is the website address. It was possible to read about the project, and the most important, to have access to all that maps. All this information can be seen in this screen, or can be just download and use in your own computer. Working with our servers, you can use this information for public-private purposes. We have thousands of visitors every month using that information. And about dissemination, in addition to our speeches and to our own dissemination, I think what's important is that our external partners, mainly scientific partners, are presenting this project in scientific conferences and publishing scientific papers. So this gives a lot of value to that maps and to that information, to those maps and to those information, because it's not our point of view, is scientific point of view that has been built up with the best information we have in our country by the most important experts in our country. So it's quite an objective point of view because it's the scientific point of view. And of course, we have published it along this year many different kind of communication supports, leaflets, toolkits, technical papers, dissemination papers, posters addressed to different kind of target groups of experts and public in general. And we have participated in some European projects. One is the Green Infrastructure Network, where this CCL GIS project was transferred to 3 different countries in Europe, or some purposes that we had in the past, like this one from Chile in South America, that they tried to apply the same in a region of Talca. We have received some international awards like IPSA. This is from Europe, from public administration in Europe, or the United Nations Public Administration Program. And we try to keep on giving open courses, workshop and conferences, not just to our partners and to municipalities, but to the whole society, to try to explain that it's possible to have progress, to have a very balanced land plan, following the principles and the information from ecosystem services through the green infrastructure approach. And that's also so many thanks for the opportunity, and happy to answer your questions if you have any.
Thank you, Carles. Thank you very much for your presentation. Very impressive. Now I pass the floor to Dragos Stefanescu from Craiova University. Just a second, Dragos, I'm giving you the role of speaker. The good practices Dragos is going to talk about is about sound management of wetland and birds in Romania. Please, Dragos, the floor is yours.
Yes, hello again. Can you share my screen now?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, it's perfect. Okay. First of all, I want to say that I'm sorry because the person who really worked in this project could never never be with us today. It's a project about cross-bordering protection of 2 species of birds, pygmy cormorant and ferruginous duck. It's a project coordinated by an NGOs in Romania, WWF Danube Carpathian Program, in cooperation with 2 environment protection agencies in in Romania, and also partners from Bulgaria. Why birds? Because birds is so important from European. As you know, there is a directive in Europe for birds. Not only because European love birds, but because European loves to hunt birds. This is the main reason who start the directive in Europe. Pygmy cormorant and ferruginous duck, despite the fact that these birds are labeled as last concern by IUCN, in Europe, they are evaluated as vulnerable because the population become scarce, and we have to manage wetland as ecosystems. The main purpose of the project was to ensure condition and maintain favorable conservation status for both species. As you see, the project manager start from indicate the verifiable indicators from the project, not only the numbers and breeding pairs for the species, but also to, as you can see on the slide, more than 2,500 hectare of functional wetlands integrated in the lower Danube Green Corridor, and to reconnect this area to natural river dynamics. This is a target species. I don't know if it's so. This is just simple birds, pygmy cormorant and ferruginous duck. So the red line, this is the above country involved in this project. It was a project who started in 2009 and finished in 2012. The red line harbor the areas, with the green are the SPA special protected areas, Natura 2000. And all these natural conservation areas was involved in the project. What about wetlands? Wetlands, as you know, are the kidneys of the ecosystems. They filter, purify, and store water, collect and retain water. There's so many functions, and also represent habitat for amount of plant and animals. They're considering this function the best practice for wetland management demonstrated by this project was efficient water management and management of habitats for birds through vegetation management measures. In particular, the reed and the meadow forest. As you can see before, the area of the project was huge. I highlight the SPI areas of the project, and I extend the presentation to a small area. The Romanian name is Balta Geraiului. Balta is pond or lake. You see here the Danube. The Balta Geraiului is here. Sorry. It's here. It's not so blue because there's a lot of vegetation, dry reeds. What was the activities and the purpose of this practice? The purpose was to control the vegetation structure in this lake, and finally to ensure the optimal nesting and feeding condition for birds. The action was to connect the ponds, the lake, with the water in the terrace and the water from Danube. It was a huge work there. They were considering carrying out an adduction channel to connect practically the lake with the Danube. As you can see here is the workers who actually created the adduction channel, and also the drainage channel for the purpose to increase the level of the water to maximum 30 centimeters, and to ensure finally the water for feeding and for breeding for birds. Other action was to mechanical cut of reed to increase the water mesh, the water size of the water eyes, to increase the feeding areas for the species, and also to excavating coastal areas along the drainage channel to expand the water mesh at a depth of half a meter to 1 meter. And this is conduct to results because many birds appear instantly after these measures. I don't want to put in this presentation the graphs and the numbers, but it wasn't a success after this practice because numbers of both species increased in the region. I told you already the project started in 2009 and 2012 when it's finished. The number was maximum for both species. So I hurry up because to bore you with the birds, but it's very important to know that it's not about birds, it's about wetland to protect birds and that to ensure good management of ecosystem function there. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dragos, for this presentation. And Yanis, it's your turn now. I give you the floor. You are the presenter. Yanis is going to speak about a good practices, about a good practice dealing with an assessment methodology of ecosystem services supporting decision making in land use management. Please, Yanis.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Dear project partners and experts, again, I will introduce myself. My name is Yanis Dragzniņš, and I am from Riga Technical University, and I will present the good practice of life ecosystem services assessment methodology. So, next slide. One moment.
Yeah, just go ahead with your, with your keyboard or mouse.
Keyboard. Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. So the good practice is the methodology of Life Ecosystem Services project, which is implemented in two project areas, Saukrasti and Jauntiemeri, which are both specially protected nature areas and Natura 2000 sites. And the project is implemented in Latvia in national level without partners from other countries. The essence of this good practice is ecosystem services assessment methodology with the core element of biophysical assessment and deriving economic assessment. This methodology is suitable for municipalities of coastal areas, for improvements in spatial planning, nature protection planning, and decision-making processes. First part of ecosystem services assessment methodology is biophysical assessment. First of all, ecosystems, habitats, and areas are being identified. Secondly, ecosystem services which are within the ecosystems are identified, and identification is done by experts who are dividing these ecosystem services into three groups: provisioning services, regulating services, and cultural services. And then the experts are developing indicators based on these identified ecosystem services, and afterwards they are carrying out the assessment of ecosystem services, and which is followed by mapping. Economy and the money, to be more specific, is the most common language in the world. I think all the project partners and experts would agree with me on this one. And therefore, the next step of the methodology is the economic assessment. It gives an opportunity to show the economic value of nature expressed in euros per hectare per year. And to get this value, three methods have been applied in this good practice. The first one is the direct market pricing, which is monetary value that is determined and paid for goods and services on the market. So basically, it is the market price. The second one is benefit transfer method, which is used to transfer information available from other studies performed in similar location or context. So other studies, information from other studies, which could be also very time efficient. And the third one is the travel cost method, which is linked to the total costs of time and travel that people have spent during their visit to a place. And ecosystem services and this ecosystem services economic assessment makes it possible to compare different ecosystem services between themselves, and it makes easier compromise decision-making processes. The next step, which could be done in ecosystem services approach, is scenario modeling. It can help assess and demonstrate potential benefits and risks by choosing one or another direction of development of the territory. And such an assessment provides a solid base for argumentation and debate in cases where different interests clash, increasing the chances of reaching a compromise and agreement on planning the development of the area by striking the balance between the triple bottom line elements. And these elements are the social, economic, and societal interests. And within the project, three types of development scenarios were executed. First one was the zero scenario, where the situation was remaining unchanged. The second one was development by improving environmental education and recreation opportunities. And we could call this also the sustainable development scenario, where sustainable governance of ecosystem services is promoted. And the third scenario is uncontrolled development of pilot area. And the experience of Latvia showed that third case scenario, where approximately half of the forest territory was converted into building territory, would result in approximately proportional loss of ecosystem services economic value. So therefore, we can really put the emphasis that the forest, in this case, is a very, very valuable and crucial ecosystem. And scenario 1 and 2 were quite similar, with slight advantage to scenario 2, which has improved the opportunities of outdoor recreation and environmental education. If we continue with the results of Latvia, further on, the totality of 22 indicators were developed. 5 provisioning services like forest berry yield and the number of lamprey traps, 13 regulating services indicators like stand density and air quality, and 5 cultural services indicators like bird watching opportunities and environmental education opportunities. Biophysical and economic assessments were carried out for 2 implementation areas, Saukrasti and Untitled, which resulted in the recommendations for policy planning documents, Saukrasti Municipality Development Program 2014 to 2020, and the Nature Management Plan for Nature Park Pie Jūra. And additionally, with the support of Saukrasti municipality, cost-benefit analysis was approbated in Saukrasti pilot area. And well, if you look at the cost-benefit analysis, this good practice gives the data on the benefit side. And the cost side, if the municipality shares the data regarding amount of investment in territory, then it is possible to carry out the cost-benefit analysis, because it provides the cost side. If we have the cost side and benefit side, then we can carry out this cost-benefit analysis, and it allows to evaluate the efficiency of the land use. And the Nature Conservation Agency also has submitted the proposals to the Ministry of Environmental Protection and Regional Development for amendments in development procedures of nature protection plans concerning the inclusion of the assessment of ecosystem services as a mandatory part of nature protection plans. Additionally to the ecosystem services economic valuation model, 2 additional support tools were developed. The first one is management strategy model, which shows the predictable changes in the quality and supply of the ecosystem services depending on the chosen type of the territory management. And the second one is the territory planning and modeling model, which shows predictable changes in the value of ecosystem services by changing the areal proportions of different types of land use or ecosystems in the territory. This slide reflects deriving added value of ecosystem services assessment. It helps to calculate investment in environmental protection, provide different spatial development scenarios, make better negotiation with different groups of society, identify economic value of nature and its contribution to society, choose the most sustainable spatial development options, determine and compare investment economic efficiency of the ecosystem, calculate the costs of the environmental damage, evaluate different ways of ecosystem management such as land use and etc. And of course, raise the awareness about the ecosystem services and their linkage with the social and economic well-being. When addressing the good practice transferability to partner regions, the methodology of ecosystem services approach provides potential monetary measurements of ecosystem services, allowing to compare these ecosystem services and make better decision-making processes. Because at the end of the day, what we need is some kind of number on which we rely on. And even though the good practice has a greater potential to be transferred to coastal areas, the framework of methodology can also be used to evaluate the ecosystem services in non-coastal areas, adjusting the indicators of provisioning, regulating, and cultural services to the regional context and conditions. And all of that can result in potential change in policy planning documents. In this slide, you can see the project webpage and information dissemination materials, including the short films, which help to achieve the total audience of almost 500,000 people. I will not show the films today to be more time efficient, and at this point I can say thank you for listening, thank you for your attention. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Yanis. Thank you very much for your presentation. We are perfectly on time with our seminar. Thanks to everybody that has intervened so far. So we can now have a let's say half an hour session, maximum half an hour session about question and answers on the good practices that have been presented so far. So I would start with any question about the SOS for Life presented by Fabrizio and go, I mean, straight on to Owen, to Carles and Dragos and then Yanis. So if you have any question for Fabrizio for the first good practice, please feel free to make them. Otherwise, I mean, you can prepare also question to other good practices also via chat. So I see Zana have a question. Please, Zana, the floor is yours.
Yes, hello. Thank you very much, first of all, for presenting this good practice, which is very inspiring also. I have some question because this is a practice which is done in the framework of project just completed last year, and there is still some process ongoing, as I understand. There has been some application of the project results already, so as you showed that there is already an impact. How would you measure the success factors? Is there any visibility of success already? And if you can compare it to something, to some other indicators? Can you please explain? Maybe I didn't really get it from the presentation. Hello?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, of course.
Thank you for your question. Yes, indeed, there is some impact already, as the 3 municipalities involved in the project already have inserted the methodology as an integral part of the future urban planning tools. So it's becoming something that is growing in terms of awareness. That's soil within urban planning is not just a platform supporting the infrastructure, but is something with intrinsic values and functions to the community that must be protected and valued as much as possible. And we already had requested from other municipalities in the regions to apply and implement methodology in order to provide the municipality the information to integrate soil ecosystem services in their urban planning strategies.
Have there any calculations been done to measure the impact of the good practice? Is there
What do you mean by the difference is that so far soil it was not just taken into account in any urban planning decision. If you have to build something, you just build wherever you think it's more feasible or economically valuable to build the infrastructure or the house. Now there is a growing concern that whenever you seal the soil, you lose something for the community, and this must be quantified and make it explicit in the decision-making processes. And there are, in order to seal further soil, you need to compensate to some extent what you are going to lose with the new infrastructure. So you have to either, let's say, deseal, take the sealing of the soil away in order to reinstall, let's say, natural soil that can function to some extent in order to compensate for the functions that you're going to lose with the new infrastructure.
Okay. Thank you for your answer. Also, I am missing this template, template number 1. You provided information in template which is supposed to be published on the policy learning platform of Interreg Europe. So I hope that you will make it after the meeting, so then there will be more extensive information in that one.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other question for Fabrizio?
Yeah, I have one question. It's more or less practical, Fabrizio. I'm intrigued when you talk about this. There were 3 possibilities, and one of them was to make sampling. But when you show the sampling in the city, I was a little bit surprised. I suppose that it's a sampling where there is no ceiling already, isn't it?
Of course. It's only in the green areas within the city texture. Yes, of course. Where there is some soil to be sampled, of course, yeah.
And the second is not exactly a question, but I was surprised that you admit that the most difficult part was the engagement of a stakeholder. I mean, I imagine that as everybody, the more difficult part is to put everybody in the same table and put them together.
Yes, and especially when you talk about soil, I mean, whatever is beneath our feet is out of our sight. So people just do not even think of it. I mean, when you talk about trees and waters and birds, whatever, butterflies, people have an experience of it. And when you deal with soil, people have no experience with it. So even policymakers and stakeholders were completely like questioning what are you talking about? So is that relevant? Why is that relevant? So it's a lot of work just to show the relevance of what are you talking about.
Totally understand. Thank you very much, Fabrizio.
You're welcome, Matic.
Yeah, Yanis, please, you can put the question to Fabrizio as well.
Yeah, I have put down the question about these guidelines, and are these guidelines the main output of the project? And are they approved by any authority already, like national, regional, or local?
Okay, there is no national authority involved in this kind of approval of guidelines. They are approved at municipality and regional level. As I said at the very end of the presentation, this kind of methodology is going to be implemented for the whole region of Emilia-Romagna in order to provide a different decision level, so regional, provincial, and municipal level, the information which are needed for urban planning at the different levels.
Okay, thank you very much for your answer.
And yet that they are not the main output. There are some other guidelines, or at least 2 more guidelines, which are output of the project.
Yeah, Carlos has another question about. Yeah, Carlos, you can put your question directly to.
Yeah, I can read on the.
Okay.
On
Yeah.
the chat. Yeah, the methodology is available. I mean, a paper has been published in the methodology already, and yeah, part of our efforts was to demonstrate that wherever soil data are available, there is a room to take them into account into ecosystem service assessment. And of course, you have to tailor the assessment to the amount and quality of data which are available. In Italy, the situation is very different from region to region, but for a vast majority of northern, central, and part of southern Italy, data are available.
Yeah. If there is no question, no further question to Fabrizio, we pass to the other good practice presented by Owen about niche mapping pilot. If there is any question, please.
Wow, I must have covered everything. Well, if anybody has any questions, you can put it in the comment or email me separately. More than welcome.
Yeah, there's a question from Balash. Balash, please.
Well, I can read it. Yeah. So Balash asked, what are the local uses of the pilot project? And are there any feedback from local authorities already using your database? Well, as I said, it was a national level pilot at a 50-meter resolution, but a lot of local authorities have started they use it as a baseline, and then they develop their own methods based on that. I gave the example of one of the local authorities within our region, within the EMRA region, Dún Laoghaire-Rathdown, that is using the NES pilot as the basis then for developing more fine-grained kind of more local level data sets. The feedback is generally good, but as I said, this was a national pilot. It hasn't been. Its implementation is a different question. So the information comes from the final report from the project and from interacting with the stakeholders, the National Parks and Wildlife Service of Ireland, and the links to that are provided in the good practice template. And of course, yeah, Carlos, you can contact me anytime. And as I say, in the good practice template, which is uploaded, the links to the data sources are there. Yeah.
Yeah, other comments are coming from Enrique and Carles, please.
Okay. Yeah, I just answered those two, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, no, yeah. So yeah, that's it.
Okay, then let's pass to any question for the good practice presented by Carles about the territorial analysis system called CITXEL. Perhaps I have one question. Okay, yeah, Nikki, go ahead. Okay.
Hi, Carlos. Thank you for your presentation. I found it really, really interesting. I just have a question about, you talked about 70% of the province is now protected as a result of the project, and it now is being translated to local policy. I was wondering, was this difficult to achieve, like consensus politically, or was this easier to achieve because of the nature of the topography, meaning that it actually cannot be developed like an urban area? Or was it just that your project was just taken on board because of the success of it?
Yeah, Carles. Carles cannot hear us.
Okay.
Yeah. Carles is here.
Okay. I can't hear him.
The microphone, he needs to open the microphone. Open the microphone, Carles. No microphone. Okay. Yeah, he has a problem with the microphone. And yeah, you can get out and try to get in again, perhaps. I don't know which can be the solution. Okay, let's say resume afterwards the questions for Carles and go now to the other two good practices presented by Dragos and Yanis. If there is any question about these two good practices before then going again back to Carlos.
Hello, it was a question for Zain to me. He asked me if we proved the improvement of the practice. I already answered to her. We can make the graph with where to express the increase of the numbers of the species in the area. Hello.
Yeah, Nikki, would you like to make any question? I see your microphone is open.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll turn it off.
That's okay. Any other question then for Dragos for the good practices for the good practice presented by Dragos? It seems no.
Cool.
Dragos. Okay. Please feel free also to use the chat for the question, or even to book let's say your question. And let's pass to Yanis the assessment methodology of ecosystem services presented by Yanis. I don't know if there is any question. Carles, I see in the meantime is back, but we're coming back to you, Carles, in few minutes.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, perfectly.
Oh, sorry about it, because having problems with the connection and trying to find a place.
Okay. We'll be back to you in a couple of minutes. Before
Thank
we
you.
need any question to Yanis. It seems that there are no questions. Okay, and then let's go back to Carles. Yeah, Carles, there were a couple of questions for you, I believe. Nikki had one. Please, Nikki.
Hi, Carlos.
Yes, Nikki, I hear, but the problem was that I couldn't speak. I heard your question. Thank you very much, Nick. Yeah. The fact is that in the region of Barcelona, I think that at that time, so in 2006, when we started that process of land planning that lasts for around 5 years, there was a big involvement of local politicians and land planners that we had a big problem of growing for decades, for many years without any plan, and that was not just a matter of protecting natural areas, but it was a problem of the model that was impossible to go on with this dispersed growth, and we had really many socioeconomical problems, and it was really easy in these ways, because the technical office who was in charge of preparing the land plan, there was a part that there were many architects and engineers dealing with settlements strategy and all that, and they already had the vision that we should concentrate our growth for the next 20 or 30 years in just some places that had the biggest capacity and the lowest impact, and they had a model to grow in just 10 mid-sized towns in the region, to concentrate new growth there, new housing and new facilities, and to try to keep the rest of the land free of new big developments. So when we arrive with our information from the other part, let's say from the open areas, saying how important it was to keep this as in good conservation status, was like if the two parts fit absolutely, the model coming from settlements network and our model coming from open areas, and in this way it was really easy, because it was so I think that it was a big conscience in our region that we had to change. And for instance, in the inland part of the province, that it's another absolutely rural scenario. In that part, it was impossible to make that big step, and the protection was just to protect some connectivity areas between protected areas already existing, and the protection was around 40%, so just increasing from 30 to 40%, but because there was not the sense that we should change, but in the metropolitan region. So the problem we had with growing everywhere without any plan was so high that I think that all the experts and politicians were already aware and concerned about a big change. It was easy to reach the consensus. I don't know if I answered.
You did. Thank you, Carlos. Excellent.
Thank you.
Yeah, Carlos, me too. I have a question for you. Have you ever, done any benchmarking about other European regions that have developed similar territorial analysis system? So, do you know if other regions around Europe has developed something similar to your system? And how is the state, of play in different regions about this kind of information that can be provided even for free, to everybody?
Well, after that project, I show you that Interreg project called Green Infranet that started in, I think, 2014 till 2017, was an Interreg project that was pushed very much by the European Commission, because at that time they were really interested in showing examples of how to map ecosystem services and how to apply for green infrastructure development. Was led by the province of Flevoland in the Netherlands, and during the last part of the project of Green Infranet. That was the part of transferring good practices from one partner from another one. As far as I know, there were three intents, 3 tries of applying. One was the same province. Yes, hear me? Yes. The one was the province of Flevoland that we applied it to look for. It wasn't a specific application. They were interested of how to try to return intensive agriculture lands back to natural habitats in terms of developing a network of ecological corridors between natural areas, and they use this just for intensive agricultural lands, trying to look for the potentiality of those areas to build up a network of ecological network of natural areas in the Netherlands. The second one was in Ireland, Owen. Yes, there was an example in the partner at that time was the county of Fingal, very close to Dublin. And I don't know if you know them, and if you know that they as far as I know, what they did was to try just to take the information already existing from environmental departments and research centers, and to take all that information that was in many different servers, and to put all together and start using for land decisions. And the third one was in Hungary, and the government of Hungary built up 2 pilot projects. One in a national park very close to Budapest, another one in the eastern part of the country, and I was there 3 times, I think, and they started with that project. I don't know exactly how it's performing now, but I know that they started with this, and I am always saying that it's just a matter of sharing information, because information exists in any region of in Europe. The matter is to make it available and to transform into comprehensive layers of information to be used in land planning. It doesn't matter if you just have 2 layers or you have 200. The importance of the project, I think, is to sit all the stakeholders around the same table and to share the information and to share a common language and to use this in land decision processes. I don't know if I answered.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Carles. If there are no further questions, I would say we can have a 10 minutes break. If you'd like, we'll be back at 11:45 and go ahead with the other 4 good practices and the question and answers session. It's okay?
Yeah, I'm saying I'm reading that questions from Dragos. Yeah, or do you prefer to? Yeah.
Yes, just a simple question.
Yeah, in this case, the assessment was in case of fauna, the major problem we had is that we had no information for all fauna groups for the whole territory. We just had some very good information about birds, because there's a local NGO monitoring birds from a long time ago. For the rest of the groups of vertebrates, we need to start with fieldwork to know the distribution of each species, and then what we did with experts was to assign a conservation value for each species based on a UCN status in our country, and after that we elaborated an indicator putting the value of conservation of all the species together with distribution maps of that species, so assigning a conservation value for each piece of land depending on what species we had there and the value of conservation they had altogether. It's basic. If basic explanation. If you want further information, you can write me, of course, and can give you some methodological documents if you are interested.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Okay, so our break is reduced to 7 minutes. 11:45 back.
Sorry about it.
It's okay. Thank you very much. Okay, Fabrizio, it's again yours. The floor is yours with the good practice. I'll give you the floor in just a second. About the guidelines for the removal, management, and the reuse of topsoil.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
So here we go with the second presentation about the guidelines for the removal, management, and reuse of topsoil at construction sites. As I mentioned before in the description of the actions of the SOS for Life project, within action B2, we have the 3 demonstration action of desealing through the removal of what we call technosoils, which is the soils that have been transformed or sealed by human activities, and the restoration of natural soil. And this is going to happen in the 3 municipality partners of the project, San Lazzaro, Forlì, and Carpi, in 3 different areas of different shape and sites. And this is the reason for the delay and the prolongation of the end of the project, because these actions are not funded by the EU. They are initiatives of each own municipality, and due to bureaucracy and delays, we got the prolongation of the project in order to come to some visible results in terms of...
Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you. We don't see your presentation yet. We see the GoToMeeting, let's say, browser with all our, let's say, if you could.
My screen says that I am sharing it, but let's see.
Yeah.
Let's try again. Can you see it now?
Just a second. Not yet.
No.
It is sharing my... I got a message that says appgotomeeting.com is sharing your screen. But
perhaps you need
some time.
A few seconds.
Not yet?
Not yet. Okay, perhaps I don't know. You can even talk without the presentation. Perhaps or we need the presentation.
Or not really. I mean,
okay.
It's less visual than the previous one.
Okay.
But yeah, it would be nice. But I don't know how to. Because according to the message I got on the screen, it should be.
Let's try to go ahead then. And
no, I think must be maybe traffic on networks or whatever.
Let's try to go ahead.
Yeah, I go ahead. So in order to support the activities related to the desealing and the reinstallation of natural soils in those 3 areas of the municipality, within the project, we produced and delivered the guidelines for the removal, the management, and the reuse of topsoils at construction sites. The aim of those guidelines is to, of course, promote the limitation of soil sealing, as suggested by the EU guideline on best practice to limit, mitigate, or compensate soil sealing, to value soil and facilitate its reuse in the production and management of excavation materials for building work and infrastructure, and to create a circular economy within which soil excavated during the realization of construction works and infrastructure are reused within a short distance and, if possible, in the same municipality. For the realization of the guidelines, we did not start from scratch, but we made an analysis of the best practice already in use in other EU countries, in the Netherlands, in Belgium, in the United Kingdom, in Germany, and in Switzerland. And we found particularly interesting the approach used in the UK and in the Swiss Federation. It's very soil-centered. So, according to the Italian legislation, an area of desealing is contemporarily a site of production of material and the site of destination of material. So our goal is to provide tools to promote the reuse of natural topsoil from construction sites to cover new desealing areas, possibly within the same municipality. Again, when you put together a number of people with different backgrounds, urban planners, architects, engineers, soil scientists, you find out that the concept of soil means different things to different persons. For the engineer, it's just the rock of the sediment to take in account for the operation of earth moving, foundation and construction. For the botanist or the naturalist, the support of plants or life. For the farmer, is the land which can be exploited to support animal and vegetable production. For the soil scientist, soil is the product of alteration and the change and the reorganization of the upper layer of the earth crust under the action of time, driven by the climate and exchange of energy along the vertical direction within the soil itself. So in our guidelines, there is a first part, sorry, you cannot see it, which is devoted to the identification of the different soil layer when you make an excavation. And we consider for the application of this top line, the uppermost part of the soil, which is generally 0 to 30, 50 centimeters, which is the part which is richer in organomineral substances, is the richest in nutrients and in biodiversity. And this is what we call topsoil. Our actions must be, of course, framed within the actual legislation which is in act in the country, which first of all refers to the EU legislation, and in particular to the Waste Framework Directive. And then there are two important laws at national level, according to which soil is defined very broadly as the most superficial part of the earth, and it also includes whatever is on the soil, so the vegetation, the infrastructures, and so on. And then in the practice, we have always to deal with regional laws and rules that define the and disciplines how to intervene on soil. And as we are in Emilia-Romagna with this project, we have the regional law on soil protection and use, according to which soil is a common good and is a non-renewable resource that performs function and produces ecosystem services that must be protected and enhanced. First of all, we have to define what is soil, then according to the existing legislation. And soil is material which is excavated within activities finalized to construction projects. So it can be derived from excavation in general, foundation, trenches, from perforation, drilling, piling, consolidation operations, from any kind of infrastructural works such as tunneling or building of roads, or also soils removal from ground leveling. The starting point is always to distinguish whether the soil is to be considered as a byproduct or as a waste. And the line which defines which is which, if it's a byproduct or a waste, depends from some environmental prerequisites, which means the presence and the concentration of a number of pollutant, heavy metals, for example, or also organic contaminators, and the materials then must be analyzed, and the value must be below some set thresholds identified by laws. We propose in the guidelines to distinguish three different topsoil material in terms of its intrinsic qualities: a premium grade topsoil, a general purpose grade topsoils, and economy grade topsoils. And depending on the quality of the topsoils material, which defines its level of fertility and its capability to restore and deliver ecosystem services once put back into place, we distinguish between those three kinds and the destination, which is better depending on the intrinsic quality, by providing a reference matrix of analytical value in terms of soil texture, of nutrient content, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and organic carbon content. And different values and combination of values of those parameters defines if the topsoil is a premium topsoil, a general purpose topsoil, or an economy grade topsoil. Then we distinguish also between different sides of construction site. For large construction sites, the guidelines suggest an ad hoc soil survey and analysis. So the municipality needs to resort to pedologists for a soil survey and to a laboratory for chemical analysis in order to qualify the topsoil, and to fill up a pedological report, which is provided as an annex to the guidelines. For the assessment of small production sites, with the difference between the small and the big production sites are in terms of cubic meters of soil excavated. So above 6,000 cubic meters is a big construction site, and below 6,000 meters is a small construction site. For the small construction site, topsoil quality assessment is based upon existing soil map and database. The guidelines furthermore propose to integrate to implement the whole, let's say, topsoil availability market on an internet platform, where there should be a register, a sort of soil bank, where the offer of topsoil and the demand of topsoil can meet and interact. In conclusion, they also are presented in the guidelines different management plans and strategies in order to handle the soil material at the site of production, at the site of storage, and at the site of restoration. So there are a numbers of tips which are given to the technicians in order to avoid the soil degradation and loss of soil during the field operation. A kind of destination is very important, that when the topsoil is put back into place, it must be loose and must be worked dry. And so this depends also on the local conditions and on the kind of soil materials. And it's very, very important that the soil is not compacted and that good drainage is provided. And all those information are provided to in the guidelines with an annexes vademecum. This is very relevant because in strong needs and requests to define rules to regulate the transportation and application of topsoils. It is when in absence of specific guidelines, whenever soil is excavated, it's still considered as a waste. And as a waste, it must disposed in a dumping site, and it has a cost of 20 euro per tons. At least this is in Emilia Romagna. It changed from region to region. And the production of topsoil material in 2017 was above 1 million of cubic tons only in Emilia-Romagna. So it's very important for the municipality to organize within its own territory the demand and the offer of topsoil material in order to ensure traceability of the soil within the municipality itself, to save time and money for companies for the dislocation of the soil materials, avoiding the risk of having to dispose it into landfill with an increasing cost for the disposal. And this, of course, would result in lower environmental impact and in the restoration of some ecosystem services. This is all. I'm sorry that you couldn't look at the presentation while I was talking, but it's available for sharing.
Thank you very much, Fabrizio, for your presentation. I hope you can still stay with us for the question and answer session. I would pass now the floor to Owen again for the presentation of a good practice called All Ireland Pollinator Framework, Plan Framework, related to, bringing together pollinator initiatives across borders in Ireland and North Ireland.
Yeah. Great. Thank you, Besnik. So yeah, this is an all Ireland pollinator framework. So it is cross-border. It includes the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. So it's international in its very nature. It can be categorized as an information dissemination and awareness raising good practice. And in summary, what it is it's an island-wide attempt to reverse the declines in pollinating insects such as bees and hoverflies, providing targeted and actionable information that can be used to sell a biodiversity message to a very wide audience. I have a short video, and with your permission, Besnik, I might share a link in the chat that everybody can click. And once you've watched the video, we can come back. But if it doesn't work, I can just keep going. So there is the link. And maybe let me know if it works for you.
Have you ever wondered why Ireland is so beautiful? Bees are threatened with extinction. Why? Because bees can't find enough food. Lush green fields and manicured lawns are actually like a barren desert for bees.
Thank you very much, Owen, for the video.
Okay, so it's finished for everybody?
For me, yeah, okay.
Great. So I think it provides some good context as to what the pollinator plan is about, what it, where the initiative came from. So the slide I have here now was just in case the video didn't work, so I'm not going to speak through that so much, but ultimately there are 81 actions across 5 key targets. Most of those actions relate to making Ireland pollinator friendly, with really good guidelines and guidance for farmland, public land and private land, so for councils, for businesses as well. So moving on to the outline of the good practice then, in terms of the tangibility and the durability of the plan. You'll note that the first plan is due to finish this year, but there's a new version currently under development, another 4-year plan, which will be from 21 to 25. It's currently open for input, so if you follow the link, you can you're free to input ideas there to be launched early next year. According to the most recent project progress report from December of last year, 2019, of the 81 actions in the plan, 96% of those are now either completed or ongoing. Most of them are ongoing, given the nature of what this is. In terms of trying to measure concrete results from this practice, obviously it provides a set of resources to be used by lots of groups, lots of kinds of people, and it's hard sometimes to capture what has been done. So in March of last year, focusing on councils, local authorities, a structured framework was developed whereby they formally sign up and have to formally report every year on their progress in terms of achieving their stated actions from the pollinator plan. So it's 1 action they must achieve within the first year, and then 4 actions within the first 4 years. On the bottom right of the slide there, you'll see a map there, and this is the Actions for Pollinators online mapping system, which allows everyone to record and register the actions they've taken for pollinators. So anybody can log in and input their information there. And this is largely voluntary in nature as well. And in the most recent progress report, it was actually noted that the voluntary nature of the management and the lack of funding largely for the plan has promoted its efficiency in some ways. So I think that's interesting. In terms of the effectiveness, efficiency, innovation and added value, the plan is supported formally by 108 governmental and non-governmental organisations. That's up from 69 in 2015. And over 230 companies, private businesses and supporters have signed up to the plan. So they implement practices on the land surrounding their buildings and so forth. And this has been helped along by support from Board BIA, that's the Irish Food Board, and the Business and the Community Organisation. Interestingly, within our region, within EMRA, the team has successfully secured funding for a 5-year European Innovation Partnership, whereby they're testing pollinator measures with 40 farmers in one of our counties within the region. As I said, in terms of funding and resources, a really interesting thing about this practice is that the plan itself and its resources were developed without funding by a voluntary expert steering group. I think that's something that's really noteworthy. The National Biodiversity Data Centre, where it's housed, provided €2,000 at the end for graphic design and for a very limited print run, and that was the total input. I suppose the real work starts when we talk about project implementation. So the chair of the steering group, Dr. Una Fitzpatrick, dedicates 1.25 days per week to this in her own role. Recently, as in actually just this month, earlier this month, one of the supermarket chains in Ireland, SuperValue, offered and has agreed to fund one project officer on the practice, €55,000 per year, which includes their travel and subsistence. And then there is a €15,000 amount paid from one of the government departments. So it operates on 70,000 per year, 55 of that being for one project officer. So it's quite tight. Supplementary to the main plan document itself, there's lots of resources. There's some there. So, you know, you can see that there's guidelines, there's how-to guides focused at different groups. It's nice to see the plan published in Irish for children. And then there's the Actions for Pollinators online mapping system, which again was developed using, it was a spin-off from another project in the Biodiversity Data Centre. It's been promoted by more than 450 interactions of various types, and here is the list of interactions for 2019 alone. So they're very active given the limited resources. There's been significant spillover in externality, and I suppose the decline of pollinators is an issue that affects most of our regions. And I think a lot of organizations and groups really do recognize this. So again, I think an interesting part is the very end of the most recent progress report, the second appendix, available at this link. But there are 17 partner organizations of various types who have actually recorded multiple external and additional effects beyond the actions outlined in the plan. That includes organised programmes of planting and biodiversity improvement, awareness raising, and the development of research and enterprise activities that align with the AIPP. So there's real proper spillover there. The Irish Heritage and Biodiversity Officer Network within the local authorities has been inspired by the plan to come together and sponsor a special pollinator award in the Tidy Towns competition beginning in 2016. In Ireland, we have an initiative called Tidy Towns, where local communities, villages, towns, groups there come together to improve the environmental quality of the places that they live in. And now pollination is a real aspect of that. There's 162 of those across the country. And then finally, the Irish Heritage Trust has developed a new special pollinator award. It's called the Green Flag for Parks competition. So that is a spin out from what their Green Flags for Schools competition, where schools compete based on environmental actions. Now it's also parks compete based on their effectiveness in rolling out pollinator strategies. At local and regional level, 21 local authorities island-wide are formal partners to the plan. That's about 60% of the local authorities on the island of Ireland. That includes 7 in the Eastern and Midlands regional area, our area, also 60%, so it very much reflects national uptake. It's a little bit lower in Northern Ireland, about 30%. There are multiple agencies who have also signed up. But I think it's really interesting how, like in our own regional strategy that Nikki mentioned, the pollinator plan is mentioned, and it really, you know, we want to use this opportunity to further transfer this practice throughout our region and beyond. Again, I'd note the limited resources, but yet the successes of this practice. So it's considered innovative, and it's been recognised at the European level through the EU Pollinator Initiative, which has actually adopted the framework as the template for the development of pollinator strategies across the EU. And it has directly informed the development of pollinator strategies, the national strategies published in Scotland, Norway, and the Netherlands. They've all used this All Ireland Pollinator Plan as their template. And to even enhance this further, there's lots of resources online, but working with the Institute for the European Environmental Policy, a new toolkit is actually going to be added to the pollinators website later this year that will provide relevant resources to other EU member states for developing their strategies. So I think that's really interesting. Finally, reflecting on the quality and the potential for learning, I think the practice speaks for itself as a rich and accessible resource, which facilitates positive steps. I think a real advantage of it is that it is bottom up. It starts at the community. It's about local action. It's about individual action. It's a non-threatening approach to address the degradation of our ecosystems as set out in the EU strategy. And as I say, transfer has already taken place in Scotland, Norway, and the Netherlands. I suppose I can conclude on some of the challenges and limitations. It's all well and good having these, good practices, but ultimately there will sometimes be resistance. So planting regimes, pesticide use, mowing, these are what councils, local authorities do, and they may agree in principle, but sometimes the contractors who are taken on to do this work don't understand the value of pollinators and aren't so quick to adopt the strategy. Also, it's sometimes takes some time for everyday people to get used to new landscapes which are pollinator friendly. There would have been a tendency for people to like very neat and tidy, manicured grass areas and very clean edges on sidewalks, but and they can be quite vocal, and this highlights the need for continued awareness raising. And then finally, of course, as I've said throughout the presentation, limited resources for implementation are a key barrier to success in this practice, but I think it's really developing. So so hopefully it can survive and thrive into the long term. All right, I hope I didn't go over too much. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Owen. That's impressive, really. And yeah. I think, it has a lot of potentiality, for transferability across regions, as it was already mentioned by you. Thank you very much.
I think I would say that, the resources are really rich online, and for any region to actually just log on to pollinators.ie, download everything, translate what's necessary, you have a practice that's almost ready to go at low cost.
Yeah. Please share all these documents in the Basecamp folder.
Of course I will. Yeah, no problem.
For all. Okay. Now the floor is for Enrique, presenting a good practice about the social environmental services at Barcelona Green Areas, which is a tool to evaluate services in urban parks and areas in the city of Barcelona. Please, Enrique.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to share.
Yeah, no.
Okay, I will share the window. Let's put this. Can you see the PDF?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, yes, it was not. I was waiting, as Thane news already. I was waiting for feedback for the organization that rules this good practice, and it came too late to prepare the presentation, and I just upload this morning the good practice standard. But I try to put at least a few points about this practice, because I consider that it's very interesting and it will be transferable easily. So that's why I make this a little bit in, how to say, not really professional, but I hope you will understand the principle, the main points. So this is a tool for measuring the socio-environmental services that provide the natural areas of Barcelona in this case. They decided to put socio-environmental because in this case environmental are limited. We talk about urban green areas, but the social I don't know how to, maybe in this way you see better. Okay, but the social are more typical from this area. So here, even if it is in Catalonian, you can see that you have some ecological services like thermic regulation, carbon management, air quality, and also related to soil infiltration and ecosystem, what they call ecosystem functionality. Recreation, like having a well, picnics, etc., sport, health, not only contribution to air quality, but also to mental health, physical health, allergies, for example, that was very interesting. Then services related to psychological or spiritual feeling, to social relationship, to urban planning, and to tourism and economy. They follow a methodology that it was more or less everything based in matrix. They put some, how to say, give me a moment. It's a methodology where you have a series of indicators, and then you relate it to the services that you want to measure, and then those were applied to the different green spaces of the city. It was divided by neighborhoods. An important thing when you have all this matrix field, and you have some parks that provide more service of one kind, or parks that provide more of other, or parks that provide too much more services than other. The thing is that you can make excellent comparisons between different neighborhoods. And this is, I think, one of the things that could be easily applied, and it's very interesting because you also can make an urban planning looking for the gaps. Like in this area, we don't have any kind of environmental services, or in this area, we don't have any kind of social services. And it's very interesting to provide services for the entire city, and not only all, because lately, when I have the meeting with the stakeholders here in Barcelona, they talk a lot about green gentrification. That we have heard about gentrification in other subjects, but not in other areas. But I never heard about it with green, and now it's happening. So this is a good tool to avoid this green gentrification, and that everybody can share the good and the ecosystem services of these areas. I thought that it was a very interesting tool because unfortunately, green areas in the city are very similar between different cities all over Europe. So those indicators and those services, I think, that are easily transferable. At the moment, this is very recent. I have only this document that is in Catalonia. They make a couple of presentations, but only at a national level. So they are thinking in transferring to other Spanish areas. But I think even is a recent tool, it has a lot of potential for transfer. That's why I wanted to make even this short presentation. In any case, I think that's all, and I hope to provide more info in the future, and I hope I can answer a few questions about it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Enrique, for this presentation. Perhaps we will have also the chance to include this presentation in other meetings we'll have in the future. I'm thinking about the next meeting, but let's see. Then I would pass the floor to the last good practice, to Andrea Kozmulevski from the Craiova University, talking about a cross-border initiative between Romania and Bulgaria on mapping and evaluating natural and technological hazards. Just a second, Andrea, I'll give you immediately the floor.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you. So now you should be able to share your screen and go ahead with your presentation.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, everyone. I apologize for the previous problem with my microphone. I'm a member of the project team from the University of Craiova, and I'm going to talk about the cross-border assessment of natural and technological hazards in the Danube floodplain. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Just a second, please. Okay. To begin with, let's see what the definition of a hazard is. A hazard represents a dangerous phenomenon, a substance, human activities, or conditions which can lead to loss of human life, injury, or other effects on health, material damage, loss of livelihood and service interruption, social and economic disruption, or damage brought to the environment, according to the terminology on disaster risk. Hazards can be classified into three main types, namely natural hazards, such as earthquakes or floods caused by natural processes, technological or man-made hazards, such as toxicity of pesticides to fauna, accidentally release of chemicals or radiation from a nuclear power plant. They result directly as a result of human activities. And finally, near natural hazards, such as desertification, which arises through the interaction between natural processes and the human activities. Let's see now which are the interactions between climate change, ecosystem degradation, and increased disaster risk. First of all, on the one hand, ecosystems degradation triggers more disasters, reduces resilience, and releases more GHGs to the atmosphere. And on the other hand, increased disaster risk undermines ecosystem and community resilience and exacerbates impacts of climate variability and change. These two lead to the climate change, which in its turn increases the frequency and intensity of climate-related disasters and exacerbates ecosystem degradation. As we can see in the diagram, the three elements are interdependent and there is a correlation between them. All of them lead to vulnerable communities. Now let's focus on the central role of ecosystems in disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation. We notice in the diagram below three listed roles. Therefore, we have here the ecosystem management, which increases the resilience of ecosystems and communities to climate change impacts, protects them from disasters, and sequestrates carbon. Also, the climate change adaptation increases the resilience of ecosystems to climate change impacts and supports disaster risk reduction. Finally, disaster risk reduction increases the resilience of ecosystems to disasters and complements climate change adaptation efforts. These three processes are also interdependent. Let's move on. The lead partner is the Institute of Geography Romanian Academy. The original title of the project is Romanian-Bulgarian Cross-Border Joint Natural and Technological Hazards Assessment in the Danube Floodplain. The project led by the Institute of Geography of the Romanian Academy was carried out in partnership with the Institute of Geography, Bulgarian Academy of Science, the National Institute of Research and Development for Optoelectronics, Research Institute for Analytical Instrumentation in Cluj-Napoca subsidiary, a Geological Institute, Bulgarian Academy of Sciences, and University of Craiova Geography Department. Here we have some graphical images showing the location and main characteristics of the area under consideration of the presented project. If we are to speak about project objectives, we can specify the following, namely to elaborate a joint integrated GIS database for the Calafat, Vidin, Turnu Măgurele, and Nicopole Danube floodplain sector, to identify the natural and technological hazards typologies, to assess the vulnerability to the natural and technological hazards, to elaborate the specialized natural and technological hazards maps, to assess soil and water quality and aquifer vulnerability to pollution with nutrients, pesticides, and heavy metals, as well as to identify the best sustainable development strategies for environmental protection. The Geographic Information System database represents the support for the maps with special distribution of sampling sites, as well as for interpolating the concentrations in order to realize the distribution maps of each chemical element. An example in this matter can be found in the preliminary map on number 3 concentration in the phreatic aquifer, made by IDW interpolation, which is inverse distance weighted. As examples, we present 2 geographic areas that were studied. Figure number 3 shows us a spatial distribution of water samples, and figure number 4 contains a spatial distribution of nitrate concentration in phreatic aquifer. Slope declivity map. The slope represents an important indicator in realizing hazard maps, mainly for the geomorphological hazards, but also in the evaluation of water resources vulnerability to pollution. A high declivity indicates a high favorability for slope processes, like landslides fall within the lowest deposits, being also a good indicator in delineating the landforms within the floodplain, either anthropic or natural, levee, excavations, islands, dried lakes, meanders, oxbows, sand dunes. Here we have a graphical image regarding the soil types within the Danube floodplain, the Calafat, Vidin, Turnu Măgurele, Nicopole sector. Here we have natural and technological hazards typologies. Among the natural dangerous phenomena that characterizes the Danube floodplain, the hydrometeorological hazards are prevalent. For the study area, the main dangerous phenomena of atmospheric or hydrological nature include floods, drought, heat waves, and to a lesser extent, thunderstorms, hailstorms, blizzards, heavy snowfall, cold spells, etc. Hydrometeorological conditions can be a factor in other hazards, such as the transport and dispersal of toxic substances. Hazard assessment. Risk assessment is a process through which the nature and extent of risk are determined by analyzing potential hazards and evaluating existing vulnerability. These could be a menace to people, property, livelihoods, and the environment on which they depend. The methodologies that are applied during the process of risk assessment respond to the given definition of risk, the probability and the frequency of a hazard event, exposure of people and their property to hazardous action, and the consequences of such exposure. The upper image shows the map of soil susceptibility to wind erosion, and the bottom image contains the map of soil susceptibility to erosion through water. As a conclusion, we state that the practice contributed to the improvement of the existing information on natural and technological hazards on both Romanian and Bulgarian border areas, and that the main results of the project are the following: a joint complex assessment and database of natural and technological hazards, hazard maps, data regarding the soil and water quality, raising awareness for citizens, landowners, and policymakers. Thank you for your kind attention, and congratulations everyone on your presentations. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Andrea, for your presentation, and thanks to all the previous speakers for respecting the time of their presentations. We are perfectly on time. Now for a 20 minutes round of question and answers, starting from the presentation made by Fabrizio on the guidelines for the removal, management, and the reuse of topsoil. Please, if you have any question on that, you can even use the chat or open your microphone and put your question by voice.
Hello. May I ask, well, not the question, maybe it's a comment, but also opinion. I already wrote it because you presented good practices belonging to the same project. They are independent good practices, of course, and then they are very different. But I don't know, should it be okay to present good practice from the same project, maybe in a very specific cases only? So there are no restrictions from Interreg Europe, but maybe if such case exists, maybe it's better to unite it into one good practice. So what do you think?
May I answer first for
Yes.
Fabrizio? Of course, thank you for this question, Zana. Yeah, of course, I mean, we can treat this, let's say, in internally to the project partners, this question, as we have to choose at least 4 good practices out of 9. Maybe Fabrizio, if I say that we will choose one of the 2 you have presented, you will not be offended. So I mean, we can choose one of them at the end, and not both. Perhaps this provides a solution. Yeah.
Sure, no problem for me. I mean, it's just up to you.
Okay.
I think there is no, also we can publish more than 4 practices in our handbook, because it says plus even all good practices could go in. I don't know, it depends how we are going to treat it. Are we going to vote as or send in emails as Sandra suggested? How we will arrive to the final number of practices for the handbook?
Yeah, we'll discuss about this tomorrow, Zane, during our internal meeting.
Okay.
But yes, of course, I mean, we can, include in the handbook 4 or even more good practices if we see that it makes sense to do that.
If I can add, I mean, they are very different. One is a methodology, substantially is a methodology of value existing data set. The other one is very practical and really tackle with operation on the field. So it depends also on the kind of practice you are looking for in order to have also a balance among what you are going to present in your handbook.
Yeah, if I may, that's exactly what I wanted to say. I mean, one thing I think it's not a problem to present 2 different good practice of the same project. It's if they are really different and they represent good practice. But not the problem, but the point that I see here is that in this first semester or the second semester, sorry, we were focusing the topic of measurements of ecosystem services. And I think there are some practices that are a little bit out of this subject. So maybe we can put it in or we can share it in another book or for another semester. I don't know. I think that maybe we have to choose the practices that are more related to the topic. I don't know what you think about it.
Yeah, good point, Enrique. As I said, let's discuss all these, let's say, issues tomorrow, and focus now on, let's say, questions, if there are any aspect that can be of interest for us of any good practice. So, I mean, mostly I say this for the potential transferability of the good practices that were presented. So if there is no no more question about the good practice presented by Fabrizio, I would pass to that presented by Wowen. I'd like to make congratulations to this, I mean, very interesting initiative in Ireland. And Owen, please, can you tell us something more, I mean, about the involvement of the private actors and how important is their contribution to the implementation of this good practice? I saw that there is, I mean, GDO, I say supermarket, providing now funding for an officer working on this good practice on, let's say, full time, etc. But I mean, what is the role of, let's say, NGOs, of farmers, of, I mean, private people, let's say, on the implementation of the good practice?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think generally there's a growing recognition of the value of the economic value of pollination, and there's a lot of kind of business support agencies that work with small businesses and large businesses as well that really do highlight the value of pollinators. It's sometimes included as part of the corporate social responsibility strategies of businesses. You mentioned SuperValu, the supermarket chain, and they're the primary funder of the Tidy Towns initiative that I spoke about during the presentation. And I think they see the pollinator plan as being a really useful tool. They're, you know, SuperValu in their marketing pride themselves on being, you know, they're a large supermarket, but they provide fresh Irish produce, fruit and vegetables, and I think you know, the value of pollinators to that sector is really clear to them, and that's why they have these initiatives. You know, there's another initiative for children that was launched earlier this year as well. And then just in terms of smaller businesses, and you know, this is very much, it's both an urban and a rural practice. And in our urban areas and in industrial areas, there's an awful lot of kind of wasteland or low grade green spaces. And you know, it's a benefit to maybe local industries in terms of maybe it's cheaper to maintain the strips of land outside their premises if they're a wildflower meadow, rather than having to cut the grass really short all the time. So there are multiple benefits.
Okay, thank you. And there's another question by Balázs. Balázs, please.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I was just was curious about if there are any agricultural companies involved in the project, because they have a huge impact, I think.
Yeah, big time. You know, in terms of sector, you know, the Irish Farmers Association, and you know, in Ireland, it's very much, you know, we have cooperatives that are involved, and individual farmers. And I think there aren't, the financial motivation for them is understanding the value of pollination by wild insects of their produce. That, you know, that the happier the pollinators are, the the greater yield they have from their produce. There aren't any specific tax allowances or incentives like that. It's very much the natural process resulting in economic benefits.
And I also would like to ask if all the guidelines, I checked the web page very shortly, were prepared in the frame of the project, because that's a lot of work, and you listed how much resources you used for the project, so it makes it even more awesome.
It really does make it really impressive. The steering group is made up of, you know, academics and people involved in the sector, and yeah, no, it's absolutely been the guidelines, all of the documentation, all of the guidance, everything that's been informed from evidence has all been produced pretty much voluntarily. The costs associated with this project is very much about implementation and awareness raising and funding for resources.
Okay, great. Other questions for Owen? Otherwise, we go to the other two good practice presented by Enrique and by Andrea. So,
great.
Any question about the tool presented by Enrique to evaluate the social environmental services in urban parks in Barcelona? Enrique, I have a question here, perhaps. I don't know if it's consistent with what you presented, but is there, I mean, we'd be interested to know about any governance tool that has been developed for the maintenance and, I mean, for keeping the parks, urban parks in Barcelona involving also local people, not only the let's say public authorities and the public companies, but also private people. I mean, also people or other private actors.
No, in fact, this is something that I asked when we had our stakeholder meeting, and they only use feedback from when they make, for example, questionnaires or things like that, but looking for those services. But they didn't imply, or for example, they make accounts of bars or services that were available on those parks, but no other private companies or even researchers were implied from outside the city hall.
Okay, thank you very much. We have still 10 minutes. Yeah, please, Fabrizio.
Can you please, Enrique, say something more about this green gentrification that this is happening in Barcelona?
Yeah, well, it's not only happening in Barcelona, but some researchers were discussing during the meeting, and also the people from the city hall, they were worried about it. It's because green people with money attract good services, attract good health services, and attract good green spaces and so on. And the city hall was worried because they want to provide services for everybody, as it is logical. But it's happening that the people begin to live in the areas that have good services, and the people that begin to live in an area normally is the people with more power, more money, and then it occurs this gentrification around good areas, and other people get apart. I mean, in Barcelona city, it's typical is a social. Well, it's happening with the apartments, and because we have a lot of tourism, so it's another kind of gentrification. but they are worried that it happens also with green spaces.
Thank you.
It's a very interesting concept about green gentrification. Very curious.
Could I just say about the green gentrification idea? It's a phenomenon that has been sort of noted in Irish cities as well. I saw a recent study about property values and property values being higher beside parks and on streets with trees and that sort of thing. So, and like some analysis was done overlaying the socioeconomic profile of populations with the greenness of where they live, and oftentimes the socioeconomic, the higher socioeconomic areas are also greener areas. So just a comment.
I mean, it's happening, yeah. Thank you, Owen.
Yeah, if there is no any other question about the good practice presented by Enrique, I've last minutes to make any question to the case presented by Andrea on the mapping and evaluation of natural and technological hazards in the border between Romania and Bulgaria.
I have a question.
Yeah, please, Enrique, go ahead.
Okay, I will answer. I saw the question on the chat. Okay. You asked me how we get to the information. Information about what? Because it was a lot of information gathered. Sample of water. I made an example. Sample of water to evaluate the pollution in all area, because the start of the project was an idea. The fear about the second Chernobyl nuclear central in Europe is Kozlodui in Bulgaria, and this is a threat for us. And we make a common system to evaluate all the pollution, in water, in soil, introduce them into a common joint database, GIS database.
Perfect. That was exactly. I mean, it's a lot of information. So I was wondering if you take already available information or you made measurements.
No, we made supplementary gather of samples, not to get only the information till then.
Great, a huge work, I imagine.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Okay. It's any questions?
So if there are no additional questions, I can say that we can stop here the seminar. We are perfectly on time, and we have been able to achieve, let's say, the objectives of this morning. So the presentation of the good practices, even, I mean, in this situation caused by the coronavirus, but as the Interreg Europe Secretariat is pushing us to find alternative ways to the normal activities, not done face by face. So I think we have at the moment accomplished a milestone of our activities for this semester, and I thank you all for your contributions, for your commitment to make this happen. So I'd like to really congratulate with all you, and I just say hi to everybody, and we'll talk tomorrow again from 10 o'clock. We have our internal steering committee meeting, and then we'll also have a debrief about this online seminar we have had today.
Thank you very much to everybody. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, well done.
Tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Everybody.
It was nice to see you. See you
Bye.
tomorrow.
European time, okay?
Thank you so much.